Morgan comes from Ireland, if you didn't hear it from his accent yet.
Best English in the world.
Yeah, and you're going to be telling us a little bit more about the multi-channel experiences from case examples from around the world.
That's right.
Okay, so there's no Guinness involved, I guess, but
no.
We'll hear from you some more. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I'll try to be as intelligible as possible. But if you don't understand me, feel free to shout or throw things at me or give out generally. So what is an Irishman doing on the stage talking to a group of Finns in Irish English? Okay, so like many things, this foreigner has been brought to Finland not by Nokia, but by love. So that's the big reason why I'm here. The other person you have to blame is Janne, sitting there in the Janne Lovahatsu from User Intelligence, who is an old colleague of mine from the User UX Alliance, which is a global network of user experience companies. And Janne introduced me to Sirte, and here we find ourselves. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. Before, as in up until September, well, June, July of this year, I was the founder and MD of IQ Content, which was a global user experience consultancy based out of Dublin, which did, I think, remarkable work with clients the likes of Citibank, Goodyear, Vodafone, etc., etc. In July, I finished up there, and I've since started a new business, a consultancy called McKeagney, intelligently and imaginatively named after my surname. And it's so new that I don't even have a business card or a website. So apologies for that, but there you go. This is the way things go. I'm also working a lot in the startup space, which has been fun. So I'm going to be starting to advise into Startup Sauna. As of next week, I'm going to be delivering some workshops into the next batch on user experience and user-centered design and experience design. And also back in Dublin, we have a very innovative city as well. I think Dublin and Helsinki are interesting. We're like the lunatic bookends of Europe, one far in the west and one far in the east. So I'm in Dublin as well, and I'm working with a lot of startup businesses there. So that's who I am. My Twitter thing is there, and they're the hashtags. So today, I wanted us to think a little bit about the way that we engage with our customers and how that's changing through time. So back in the old days, and when I talk about the old days, I may be talking about 10 or 15 years ago, we lived in a physical universe. And when we went to do things, we went to a place, typically, to do them. So up on the left-hand side, you have a kind of a dark picture of a pub in Dublin called Hartigan's. It's a smelly old Irish pub. And that's where our company started, IQ Content. Good place for an Irish company with global ambitions to start in an Irish pub. That's where we started. If you wanted to find information, you went to the library. If you wanted to buy something, you went to the store. And all the things that kind of was bound in place was once you were someplace, you were in a controlled environment where your experience in that environment was curated. There was somebody who owned the space and made you feel welcome in the space and ensured that the experience that you had in the space was a positive one. So this is an example of a wine shop in Dublin called the Corkscrew. And if you ever go to Dublin, I would strongly recommend that you go in, because you can buy wine anywhere, but there's only one shop like the Corkscrew, because it's populated and managed by these two lunatics, is the only word for them, who love their wine and are passionate about their wine and give a really unique welcome to everybody who goes to that shop. So it's unique in that sense. Of course, things have moved and things have moved on. So since that single physical shop or the physical place, we've had an explosion in channels. You know, starting with the phone, then we have email, then we have web, then we have tablets, and we have mobile. We just have a general explosion. Something in particular started to happen about 2010, 2011, and we started to notice it with our customers. This is an example of a mobile access data for a customer of ours. So it's a very large utility company, an electricity company. And what you see is over literally a 12-month period from January 2010 to March 2011, they had a 2,044% increase in mobile traffic through to their sites. So this was different because they weren't really prepared for that, and they hadn't really designed their experiences for their customers coming in over mobile. They hadn't really thought about it. About the same time, we were doing a project for the same customer, and we had what I would call the epiphany with the plumber. So we were doing some user research. We were sitting in a man's house. He was a plumber. He was a person who fixed toilets. And we were trying to test a self-care portal for this utility provider. So a portal, a web portal where people and customers could go in and self-serve and do their own stuff through it. And we were there and we designed this beautiful new web-based, as in desktop-based system for self-care. And the plumber, it was sitting in his room, it was sitting 10 feet to the left over there, but instead of going and using the computer, the plumber reached into his pocket and pulled out his very battered Nokia N82 to access the site over really crappy WAP technology. And we were, no, 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 it's not designed for that. It's designed for this. And he was, well, I'm going to just look at it on this anyway. So immediately we see that the customer is deciding how they interact with us, not us deciding how we would like them to interact with us. And what's happened since then, and mobile has really been the key driver for it, is that physical has come back into play. So we used to think, we thought that maybe the physical space wasn't as important once we had the digital explosion. But in fact, what we're seeing is that the physical and the virtual are now very much merging together. And the key driver that's making that happen is the advent of mobile and mobile technology, which means that the customer is always connected and that you can serve up all sorts of experiences to people in physical and digital environments. So for example, up here we have a bank. There's a bank in Ireland that we did a lot of work with, and they have an experimental banking space that includes stuff like phone and internet access and all that kind of stuff, but it's a physical space. Here we have the showrooming phenomenon that I was talking to Lowry about, whereby people are in store, but they're connected, so they're looking to see what people think about products, what their friends think about products, where else they can get it, what kind of price they should be paying for it, etc. So we're seeing new ways in the way, new behaviors in how people are shopping and new behaviors in how people are engaging with companies. So this is a study from Google. It's from 2012, but it's interesting. And these numbers, I'm not going to hit you with many statistics because you could drown in them and they change every couple of months. But the key point here is that shopping is changing, just like other customer interactions are changing. And they're becoming somewhat random. So where before we would think, yes, people, if they're on a mobile, will do X, and if they're on a desktop, they'll do Y, and if they're in a store, they will do Z. We're finding that customers are actually changing and doing whatever they feel like in whatever context. So we think about it. What do you do when you book a hotel, for example? You start out on a website. You might ring your wife to say, what do you think about this? You might then send the hotel an email to say, have you got a room that could also take an extra bed for our kid? You might then go on to a social site and see what people are saying about it. And then finally, you might mobilely try to book it because you're in a rush and you need to get it done. The point is that people are changing how they do it and changing how they interact. So how do we make sense of that as people who are trying to serve up good experiences to our customers? If things are changing and if people are using new channels, how do we make sense of it and how do we ensure that they are having a good experience in all that they do with us? Now here's a really simple framework for thinking about this, and it hasn't come out very well. But at a very simple level, channels, whether they're physical or digital, exist to connect your business with your customers. And it's that simple. To optimize the experience of the customer, you have to really understand them. To optimize the business and the profitability of the business, you need to ensure that you're serving those customers efficiently. And the choice and the experience that your customers have across all channels that connect them to you is critical in determining whether or not your business is successful. And this is kind of timeless. I really liked Larry's photo of the Caesar quote, where yes, things have changed and yes, technology is advancing, but at the same time, people don't change. This is a comment from Peter Drucker, who's an American business guru. And Peter actually things have moved. That's meant to scratch out the other. Anyway, his original quote is, "The aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits him and sells itself." Multi-channel strategy is just that. It's the same thing. It's understanding how we serve our customers in such a way that the services that we provide them fit them perfectly in whatever way they choose to interact with us. So, plus ça change. Nothing really changes. It's all about understanding the customer, understanding their needs, and trying to delight and maybe even surprise them. So how do we do that? Well, here's another simple framework. And I'm going to talk you through some of these things. So we start off by trying to actually understand them, trying to understand how they behave and how they interact with us. We move on from that to try and make some insights into, well, how can our business play to our strengths to actually meet these needs in a novel way? We then look to ideate and execute, to try and develop services, probably a mix of physical and digital services that really optimize the experience of the customer engaging with us. And then based on those experiments and based on data of how they work and how they don't work, we try to ideate and evolve those things through time. I have a bias, because it's where I come from for digital channels. But everything I say could apply to any other channel, and indeed all channels. So we start with research. We start by trying to understand the customer. And this could be as simple as sitting and watching them, as watching them interact with our digital services. So what you have here on the right-hand side is somebody engaged in a user test. It can be going out and talking to them. This was a customer of a large UK supermarket, a posh UK supermarket that we worked with. And she actually wrote a letter. She was beloved of this brand. She loved the brand. And she wrote them a letter saying, "This is what I would like from you. I love all these things about you, but you're breaking my heart through digital channels. You're great in store, but you're terrible in how I interact with you from mobile and how I interact with you in store. And these are some of the things I would like to see you doing." We also obviously have data, understanding what people are actually doing and when they're doing it. And out of this, we can start to build a picture. So how many people in the audience will be familiar with personas? I'm sure everybody is. We're all familiar. So this is an example, again, from this UK supermarket, where we try to boil down all that data and all that insight into an actionable and fairly robust representation of not a person or a demographic, but a set of behaviors, how a particular type of customer engages with the organization. So we're not that concerned with who she is or what age she is. What we're interested about, what her goals are and what her behaviors are, and what that means for the opportunities for our business to serve her better. We can then take this and move the persona on to try and map the interactions of the customer with the organization as a whole. This is an example of an experience map. How many people would be familiar with that tool? So about half. Yeah, very good. So this is an example from Adaptive Path, who are really strong. Yanni was just telling me they've just recently been bought by a bank in the US, but a very strong consultancy. And what they're showing here is how a customer engages to buy a ticket, to buy a railway ticket. And what they've done is they've mapped out the various stages in that process. They've mapped out the various interactions at each point along the way. And they've defined opportunities for how they engage with the customer at each point and how they make the experience for the customer better. This was an example from some of our work, which was for a giant tire provider. And this is an interesting, kind of a slightly different challenge in that this was for a service that didn't exist. So what they were trying to do was figure out, well, how would you sell tires to people? And obviously, there's a digital component, but there's also a very tangibly physical component, because you have to get the tires on the car. So what you see here is us mapping the various key stages that the customer is going to go through, and then we try to envisage where are the touch points along the way where we can actually serve up those experiences. And they could be physical, they could be digital, they could be social. And then from that, we identify the different services or interfaces or whatever that we need to create to make that experience happen. Moving on from that, some of the other tools and techniques that we use to try and make sense of things is breaking down company silos. So it's really hard to deliver a great customer experience if people within an organization aren't talking to each other. And many of the great opportunities that you have to serve up novel and innovative ways of doing things, they actually exist in the organization already. So here's a technique where we're literally taking people from different parts of the organization, bringing them together, breaking down barriers, and collectively sketching what that new experience, what those new services could be for the customer. And then we can map that out into some kind of strategy that we have around various channels doing various things. Finally, we can actually try to build out those services and make them real. This is an example from a bank based in New York. We did this at about 2012, I think. And this was trying to imagine what this new service could look like by actually building it. And in this case, it was put onto an iPhone and it was sent over to New York to be tested and used by the CEO of this very scary giant bank. So we had 2 weeks to do it, to build this thing and put it out there and see how it works. So actually making tangible items that we can then test and use with our customers. Okay. So there's this great quote from Steve Jobs where it's design is how it works. Design isn't how something looks, it's how it works. And as we move into the multi-channel world, and as we start to design, becomes critically important in how we design those experiences that we want our customers to have. Okay. So, I'm just going to finish up with a simple kind of case study just to bring you through how we have, in one case, how we worked to bring the channels together. So there's an example from Vodafone. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to innovate on the in-store experience, so make the in-store experience better for customers, with the objective not just for customers, but also for making the store more efficient. So they wanted to be able to serve more people and to serve them more efficiently. So it was trying to bring self-service into the store. So how do we do that? We go out and we start to observe. This is Grafton Street in Dublin. Derek, who is the creative director and the man working on this, literally spent time hanging around in the store, seeing what the store guys were doing, seeing what issues they had, talking to them. We look at the interfaces that they're using to serve customers at the moment and how they lay out the stuff in the store in how it is. Bring this data back to the office and start to analyze and group it and bring it together. And then the sketch on the napkin. This is Derek. How about if we came up with an interface, something like this? And we take it out and we bottle it down a little bit more and we start to iterate it. And then we build it out. So this is built out as a, and what this is for customers to choose the plan that they want to use. So it's a self-service way of choosing your mobile plan. So it's built out and it's done in such a way that you can do it on tablet, but you can also do it on big screen, so customers can come into the store and they can play with it. That's how it's built out. And then it also got used in the call center, so that when people were calling up, they had a web version of the same tool, so that people could choose their plans or service agents could help them figure out what plan worked for them. So it was a great project and worked really, really well and was loved by the client. So that's it. That's like a rapid, enormously fast run through multi-channel and what you could do with it. But I suppose we'll leave the last word to Peter since we started with him. The purpose of a business is to create a customer. It's that simple. And the purpose of customer experience is to make sure that we don't just create the customer, but that we keep them. And the way to keep them is to look after them. And we all know that. So that's it. So thanks very much for your time. Feel free to give me a call or drop me an email. And thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We have still a couple of minutes here since we. Get a photograph of this in flight. in flight. In flight. One question I'd like to ask you: what has been your moment of magic with in creating customer experiences for such big companies?
In what sense?
In the sense that what has been the most interesting multi-channel creation exercise that you have been involved in?
Well, I love the My Way. The Vodafone example was great because it started out as one thing, and the design was so elegant that it suddenly started to be used in other channels, and it kind of became something that got a momentum all of its own. So it was genuinely novel, and the customer loved it, and it did everything that it was supposed to do. So I think that was personally potentially my